Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Let's begin with Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapad Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Shri Krishna
Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Nama Om
Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So we welcome you all for trimester 5, session 3. We are in chapter number 13 and we will begin our session with the quiz Gita Rewind. So here we are sharing the poll at the window and we want you all to carefully read the questions and mark the correct answers.
This quiz is easy. At least some questions are very easy. Just read the question and the options carefully and I'm sure you will get them right.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mark your attendance if you have completed the quiz, and here is the result of the quiz. Question number 1. By knowing the knowable, one attains liberation. True.
Question 2. Supersoul is transcendental and untouched by material energy and Sachidananda Vigraha. So option D is the right answer, all of the above.
Question 3. The soul or jiva is independent of the supersoul. So here the question is about independence of the jiva, but we know the jiva is completely dependent on the supersoul. So the answer is false.
Who can understand the knowledge that Krishna explained in chapter 13? Well, Krishna himself says that only his devotees, and therefore option D is the right answer.
Next question. Who is responsible for the result of one's past choices? And the correct answer is D, living entities.
Why does the jiva keep changing bodies? Well, misidentification with Prakriti, misuse of minute independence, and therefore option C or both is the right answer.
Definition of God: He is supreme master, supreme enjoyer, and supreme proprietor. True.
Next question. The jiva is influenced by material desires. Since when? Well, since time immemorial, and option A is the right answer.
Material nature facilitates and living entities make choices. So D is the correct answer. Thank you all for the quiz, and here we proceed with the chapter. So we have completed till verse number 22 in the last chapter, last session. We are in the fourth section, the enjoyer. So let's begin from there.
So in the that we covered 20th, 21st and 22nd that we covered in the previous session, just a quick recap. One thing that Krishna told, that Prakriti and the living entity are beginningless, being the Shaktis of the Lord. So they are beginningless, they are eternal, not just the Jiva, but also Prakriti, that is the inferior energy of the Lord. And what does Prakriti manifest? It manifests the body, it manifests the senses, and of course the enjoyment and the distress that is created or experienced by the senses through the modes of nature. So that is all Prakriti. And what is Jiva? Well, Jiva, because of his ignorance of his real constitutional position of misidentifying with the material energy and thinking that it is the body, with its mind, it experiences the happiness or distress produced by the senses. Actually, it is otherwise completely independent of it. So let's move to the next verses. Upadrashtanumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshwaraha paramatmeti chapyukto dehesmin purushah paraha.
Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the supersoul.
So there are so many qualities of who's being mentioned here. So very clearly the person is being identified, and that person is Paramatma. If you look at the third line, Paramatma is being mentioned. So Paramatma, the qualities of Paramatma are Purushaha Paraha, the last line, which means he is the enjoyer, he is the supreme personality beyond the modes of material nature, transcendental. And then we have Upadrashta Anumanta. If you look at the first line, these two words, what do they signify? They signify overseer and permitter. He is the witness, and he is also the sanctioning authority or the permitter, so that living entity can do and execute his desires, for which he is changing bodies in this material world. And apart from that, Bharta means one who maintains, Bhokta means protector, Maheshwara, he is the supreme, most powerful, supreme Lord. So let's look at the translation. Yet in this body there is another. Why? Because in the previous verses the discussion was of the body, which comes from Prakriti, and who's in that body? The soul or Jiva. And here Krishna further explains, yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the super soul. So one thing that we need to understand is that specifically this verse, because Krishna has explained about Paramatma in the previous verses also, in this chapter, and why is he again talking about this? So in this verse he wants to tell us that soul and super soul are distinct, they are different, they are not one. So that's a very important piece of information that Krishna is giving here. Why? Because there are many Mayavadis, and many people think that there is body and the living entity and God are one or same. So they do not have this knowledge of Jiva and Paramatma are different. They think they are same. So that is one mistake that we must avoid after reading this particular verse. And therefore, in this particular verse, we see that Krishna is specifically using the word Paramatma. So this is like the definition of the super soul or the scope of God, scope of Paramatma. One, what? Overseer. He is the witness of the living entity's action. There is nothing, there is no thought, there is no desire which goes without Lord's knowing. The Lord knows it. Lord knows us in this life. He knows all our previous life. We have forgotten, but Lord remembers. He is the permitter of Jiva's action. So Lord is the sanctioning authority. When he sanctions, Jiva can perform and can fulfill his desires well. And also the supreme, he is the supreme master, Ishvara. He is the supreme enjoyer, Bhokta, and he is the supreme proprietor. So all these qualities, if you'll notice, across religions, if we look at God and we see how God has been defined, we see that these are standard qualities of God. So somehow we are coming to a definition of God, and Krishna is very clear, So if we look at Bhagavad Gita of Vedic literature, definition of God and who's God has been made very, very clear, so that we do not have any problem or any confusion. Remember, Lord is the witness, overseer, and permitter. He's watching us from within and without. We are always under Lord's CCTV surveillance. Now, if you're traveling anywhere, whether we are at the railway station or at airport, or we go to any mall or any shop, and now these days, even any house, there is always, you will see a board there, you are under CCTV surveillance. Well, that surveillance is being done by the Lord right from within our heart. Well, the CCTV coverage which is done outside is from a security point of view, but here Lord is sitting in our heart as our intimate friend. He does not want to leave us and go. He wants to be there for us, with us, irrespective of what we do, what we think, and what we desire.
Evam
Veti purusham prakritim cha gunai saha sarvata vartamanopi na sabhuyo vijayate.
One who understands this philosophy concerning material nature, the living entity, and the interaction of the modes of nature is sure to attain liberation. He will not take birth here again, regardless of his present position. So Krishna is talking here about three specific things. He says that one who understands, one, material nature or prakriti, two, living entity or the jiva, and three, the interaction of the modes of nature or guna. So these three things, if somebody understands, then he is sure to attain liberation. So the result of acquiring this knowledge, so Krishna has started this very interesting section from verse number 20 onwards, and he's saying the result of this knowledge is one person would surely attain liberation from repeated birth and death. So here it is mentioned about prakriti or material nature, guna or modes of material nature, and purusha. We saw that there are two personalities who are residing within this body. So jiva and the jivatma and the paramatma. So if a person understands all these things, then he'll surely attain liberation.
So if he applies his personal endeavor in this regard, he takes the association of devotees, he takes the serves the spiritual master, receives the knowledge from them, and that's how he understands the scriptures, then he will not really come back to this material world again. He'll go back to the spiritual world.
Let's put in all efforts in understanding the knowledge of material nature, the super soul, and the living entity, as it is the only way out from this miserable existence. So Krishna is being very kind to all of us. He is explaining this in much needed detail. He is elaborating. We may think that it is sort of little thing he has discussed in second chapter, and sometimes later he discusses and then again he's bringing up. So it is for our benefit so that we understand it completely clearly. So that is why he is doing that. ध्यानेनात्मनि पश्यन्ति केचिदात्मनमात्मना अन्ये साङ्ख्येन योगेन कर्मयोगेन चापरे अन्ये त्वा एवमजानन्तः श्रुत्वान्येभ्यः उपासते तेऽपि चातितरन्त्येव मृत्युं श्रुतिपरायणः.
Some perceive the super soul within themselves through meditation, others through the cultivation of knowledge, and still others through working without fruitive desire. So this is verse number 25. Now there are two types of people in this material world. One who are atheistic, who are skeptics, who are agnostics. Agnostics means those who think that we cannot know God, or it is not possible to know God. There is no knowledge about God. So they are the agnostics. So that is one category. And then there are others who have some faith. And when they have faith, especially in Vedic literature, in the bona fide disciplic section, they have some little faith. Then what they may do, they may either meditate. So that Ashtanga Yoga is being mentioned here by Krishna, or through cultivation of knowledge. So Krishna is talking about Gyan Yoga, or he is talking about working without fruitive desire. So Krishna is talking about Nishkam Karma Yoga. So what happens is when people have some faith, then they want to know about the Lord. They want to know about Paramatma, and they may use any of these processes, either of yoga or jnana or Nishkam Karma Yoga. So they may use that process. And yet there are others, because this is not possible for everyone. So what then Krishna talks in the tells in the next verse, 26th verse. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. A very, very interesting point, and this is so much applicable to the modern world, modern times, because we are not given spiritual knowledge either in school or at home for most of us. Right? We are not given this now. How many of us have been taught Bhagavad Gita in schools? How many of our parents have taught us not just the verses but the essence of Bhagavad Gita? How many times have we been inspired to worship the Supreme Lord? Very, very rare. So what is the Lord saying? That a common man, he may not have knowledge, but if he hears from authority, by hearing from authority, by hearing about the Lord, then he develops that faith, and then he accepts Krishna as the Supreme Lord, and then he begins to worship him, and then he perfects his life. So just by hearing, his spiritual life starts, and that is how they can actually transcend the path of birth and death. So Krishna talks about two processes. One is through yoga. People who have faith in the Vedic Sanatan Dharma, so they may either choose the process of Ashtanga Yoga or Gyan Yoga or Nishkam Karma Yoga. And those people who are not qualified, why? Because for these processes, being situated in Sattva is required. Without being in Sattva is very difficult to study Vedic knowledge or even to meditate. It's very, very difficult. So for others, what Krishna is saying, just by hearing. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was the preacher of Krishna consciousness, he would travel on foot from place to place and chant the holy names of the Lord. And by hearing those holy names, people developed so much of faith. In fact, they developed love of God by hearing the holy names from the mouth of Lord Chaitanya. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita amongst his devotees. So that is how they developed intense devotional service or bhakti yoga just from hearing.
Actually, we read Srimad Bhagavatam, so there is so much of description about this process of hearing, especially in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the pastimes of Supreme Lord Krishna is mentioned in great detail. So if we see, there is this very simple fruit seller, and she had just one basket of fruit which she would go from one street to the other, to the third, to the fourth
One
street.
town to other.
Sometimes, yes, one side of the village to the other side, or one small village to the other. And she would just like sell the fruits. So that is what she was doing. And while doing that, because she was visiting various places, so she would hear. And people in Vrindavan, what they would talk. So in Vrindavan, all the Brajvasis, they would actually be glorifying Krishna. So they would talk that Nanda's son, he is so naughty, he's so mischievous, he did this Damodar pastime yesterday, or he killed one demon yesterday. So like that, they would constantly discuss Krishna Katha. And this lady, this poor lady, this fruit seller, all she was doing was hearing Krishna Katha, not even intentionally, but wherever she would go, she would hear such things. So by this, her devotion increased so much. Her desire to meet Krishna increased so much that finally she started searching, and finally she reaches and she sees Krishna face to face. So the power of hearing. There is another example there in Srimad Bhagavatam about the Brahman Patnis. So there is a group of these Brahmanas, the caste Brahmanas, who were studying Vedantas and performing sacrifices in order to perfect their lives. And their wives, they were just like, they would hear about Krishna again from other villagers or other, like this fruit sellers. So similarly, others vendors would come to their house, and that is the time when they would hear about Krishna. And just by hearing, attentive listening and surrendered listening about Krishna, they developed so much of love for Krishna that when the time came, so there is an occasion where actually Krishna sent his friends to go and get something for him to eat. So when they go to the Brahmana, though the Brahmanas were highly qualified and learned in scriptures, but they have not heard enough about the glories of the Supreme Lord. So they did not identify that, okay, so this person is actually the Supreme Lord. So they did not give anything for Krishna to eat. And the same boys were set to the Brahman Patnis, and they immediately could connect, and they, whatever they had, they picked up everything and they ran towards Krishna to meet him and to feed him. So the devotion increases just by hearing. So this is what this is what Krishna is mentioning here, that in verse number 25, he is giving various options like meditation or Sankhya Yoga or Karma Yoga and achieving God through that. And he's saying that otherwise simply submissive hearing is enough to understand God.
Educated, uneducated, old, young, male, female, rich, poor, attractive, unattractive, black or white. Anyone and everyone can take advantage of hearing from self-realized souls and gradually attain perfection in spiritual life. So all we have to take is take advantage of hearing.
Moving to the next section, verse number 27 to 35, Jnana Chakshu. So the Lord has described, the Lord is telling us, he's talking about the position of Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetragya, Gyan, Gyayam. So he has actually answered all the questions what Arjun has asked. And now he is going to describe that how the person who has the knowledge, who has the answer to all these questions, what is their vision? How do they see or how do they act?
So that's why the title of this section is Jnana Chakshu. So through this knowledge, what is the vision if we see the world with this knowledge? Yavat sanjayate kinchit sattvam sthavara jangamam kshetra kshetagya samyogat tadviddhi bharatarashabha.
O chief of the Bharatas, know that whatever you see in existence, both the moving and the non-moving, is only a combination of the field of activities and the knower of the field. So he's telling whatever you see, Thavar and Jangamam, whatever is moving and whatever is non-moving, everything is actually a combination of what? Matter and spirit, field of activity and knower of the field.
So actually something similar is stated by the Lord in 7th chapter 6 verse. He says etad yonini bhutani, and there the Lord says that all created beings have their source in these two natures. So in verses before the 6th verse, Krishna explains about the material energy, and he says a superior energy of mind, the spirit, soul, and then he says that everything in this material is combined of these two energies, and that's the same thing that Krishna is explaining here again about kshetra, kshetragya, sam yoga. So the combination of prakriti or nature and the living entity is actually manifest in this material. All living entities, whether moving or non-moving, is just combination of these two energies of the Lord. So we have field, prakriti or kshetra, we have the knower. So it's like the material world is manifested from the Supreme Lord, and like a farmer, we see that what the farmer does, he places the seed in his field, and then out comes the plant. And similarly, the father impregnates the mother, and the child comes. So similarly, the Lord impregnates the material energy, prakriti, and the combination of body and soul emerges from that. And here we see that there are so many different species. So irrespective of the outer covering, each living entity, everything that lives, is but a combination of these two, field and the knower of the field. So moving
or
or
not
non-moving,
moving, body or soul, matter or spirit, Krishna is the source of everything.
aham sarvasya prabhu. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram vinashyatsva avinashyantam yaha pashyati sapashyati.
One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understand that neither the soul nor the super soul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. So now Krishna is talking about who is the real seer, who can actually see the things in proper perspective. So here he is mentioning 2 points. The first point is that one needs to understand, we need to understand that different bodies, like my body, your body, all the animals' body around us, our relatives' bodies, our friends' bodies, the plants' bodies, so different living creatures, whatever we see around us, in all these bodies, actually two people are present, or two identities are present. One is individual soul, and second is the super soul, Atma and Paramatma. So Atma and Paramatma are present in all the living creation, what we see around us. And secondly, he is telling here that this Atma and Paramatma, they are actually residing within the body which is destructible. So the body in which they are staying is destructible, but they are indestructible. So this is the vision of the true seer, that he identifies Supreme Lord distinct from the Jiva. So he knows that Lord and the Supreme Lord, Lord and the living entity, or Atma and Paramatma, they are eternal and they are individual. They never become one. They don't combine and become one. They are always separate identities. Both are situated in temporary body, and living entity is Jiva combined with the Prakriti. To see the three things, the body, its proprietor, and the supersoul as the friend of the soul, in their proper perspective is real seeing.
So Krishna is performing cataract surgery in this particular section. In fact, whole Bhagavad Gita, we have cataract, we are not able to see the reality, and Krishna is performing this operation. So if we are submissive, we are lying on the operation theater and very submissive to this supreme surgeon, and all we have to do is allow him to perform that surgery, and then we can actually see things as they are. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra samavasthitam ishwaram nahi nasti atmanatmanam tato yati param gatim. One who sees the super soul equally present everywhere in every living being does not degrade himself by his mind. Thus he approaches the transcendental destination. So what this verse is saying, that one who sees the super soul equally present in all living entities, does not degrade himself by his mind. So just to give you an example, when we see a very naughty child, so there is a naughty child, and the child is probably afraid of his uncle. Just an example. So the child is performing all naughtiness, and the moment uncle comes, the child sees the uncle and then becomes very quiet. He is afraid of the uncle and doesn't want to do any mischief. So that's by fear, but something similar. See, our mind is always so much attracted to sense gratification. It is addicted to sense gratification. What do we want to enjoy? We want to exploit natural resources. We want to exploit personalities, people, relationships. Because in every relationship, we see how I can enjoy in this relationship, how this person can give me enjoyment. So our mind is addicted to such enjoying tendency. Now, after reading Bhagavad Gita, and especially this section, we understand, oh, in this person, God is there, Paramatma is there. And if I'm trying to exploit, God is watching me. He is watching me from inside, and He is watching me from the heart of the other person. And then when I see the Lord everywhere, then naturally the mind becomes detached from that enjoying tendency. So that is with relationships or even any object of this material world. When I see, oh, this is, made up of external energy of the Lord. So it should be used in Lord's service, not in mine. So that was a huge difference between Ravan. So we see in Ramayana that Ravan was so lusty and greedy that he wanted to enjoy Mother Sita. Mother Sita is considered the internal energy of the Lord. So he wanted to enjoy that. So that is the nature. So if our mind is not restricted, we will definitely degrade. And on the other hand, we have the example of great devotee Hanuman. He was searching, and he found Mother Sita, and his whole effort and life went into how I can connect and how can engage the service, the energy of the Lord, and connect the energy of the Lord with the Lord. How can I take the knowledge of Mother Sita to Lord Ram? What can I do so that my Lord can go and defeat Ravan and rescue Mother Sita? So we have to decide, because mind is crooked, the thoughts and desires are crooked because of so many lifetimes of this tendency. We have to see that which role we want to fit, whether it's Ravan or Hanuman. So result of such mature vision, when I see Paramatma everywhere, in every person, in every object, we see that it is the energy of the Lord, then I will lose the natural, that innate tendency of the mind to enjoy everything, because I see Lord here, Lord there. So, I'll naturally get some detachment.
Prakrityaiva cha karmani kriyamanani sarvashah yah pashyati tathatmanam akartaram sapashyati. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created of material nature, and sees that self does nothing, actually sees. So actually this is another point of the true seer or the Gyan Chakshu. Gyan Chakshu means one who has the Chakshu or eyes given by Gyan or scripture. So how does he see that? He knows that all the work physically, everything, it is actually carried out by this by this body, which is made of material nature. And the self, now who is the self? The self here is the Jivatma. So the self does nothing, the self is observing, and the body is actually working or doing things. So the true seer's vision about Jiva or Prakriti, so what happens is, I as a Jiva, I as a living entity, I have some material desires. I get some desires. So based on my desire, I get a suitable material body. So material nature provides me this body, which facilitates me in fulfilling those desires. So I as a Jiva desire, and based on my desire, I get an appropriate body. And once I get a body, so with that body, because that body is made of material nature, which is under the control of the modes of material nature, so I am forced to act as per my body's constitution. So different living entities, like different animals, different human beings, they behave differently. They have their acquired nature. And this acquired nature a person gets because of the influence of mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. in detail we would be seeing in the next chapter. But then these three gunas, these three type of qualities of material nature, actually they bind us, they force us to work in a certain manner. So now who is ultimately responsible? Is the material nature responsible, which because that is what is forcing me? Is my body responsible because that is what is actually doing things? But ultimately it all begins from me, the jiva, because I desire. So I desire to acquire a body. Like for example, I want to fly, but this body, I don't have wings, I can't really fly on my own. So then if my desire becomes very intense, then probably at the time of death also I would be thinking about how can I fly, or how I could not fly throughout this life. And then in my next birth I acquire a body of a bird wherein I can actually fly. So when I acquire that body, then body is forcing me to act in a particular manner. So this is what this verse talks about. Yada bhuta pratak bhavam ekastham anupashyati tata eva cha vistaram brahma sampadhyate tada.
When a sensible man ceases to see different identities due to different material bodies and sees how beings are expanded everywhere, he attains to the Brahman conception. So this person, this Gyan Chakshu, by seeing that these are bodies, beyond the bodies, in every body we have the Jiva and we have Paramatma. So when a person has this, he becomes one thing, sensible. Otherwise he was nonsense. Now he has become sensible, and this sensible person, what he's able to see beyond the body. So whether it is a black man's body, or it is a white man's body, or it is a colored man's body, or it is a one of the things that is hypocrisy, that we want to protect the dog but we want to kill the cow. We see that so much of love is given to the dog these days, but the cows are slaughtered, the chickens are slaughtered, and the goats are slaughtered to satisfy the tongue. So the point is that this sensible man is able to see that it's not just an animal, actually it's a soul, and there is Lord also residing in their heart. So then he does not identify living entity based on his body, but then he identifies spiritually all the living entities. So this is the Brahman vision. Now we see that beings of same spiritual nature are expanded everywhere, whether it is the animal in the jungle or the tree or the bird or the man. It is the same spiritual spark that is everywhere. The separate entities, people who are influenced by modes and who are influenced by the Prakriti, by Maya, Shakti of the Lord, they only identify based on the bodies. Otherwise, that is not the real identity of that person. Anaditva nirgunatva paramatmayam avyayah sharirasthopi kaunteya na karoti na lipyate.
Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjun, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. So here the focus is on the qualities of the soul, and how the soul or the living entity, how we are all embodied, how we are all staying in the body. And staying in the body means we are actually in constant association or constant touch with the material nature. But we do not get any of the quality of material nature. We still are transcendental, we are eternal, and we are beyond the modes of material nature. So though the soul is residing within the body, the soul is not entangled. The soul does not become one with the material nature also. So there also it remains separate. So the qualities what is mentioned here, it is imperishable, it is transcendental, eternal, and beyond modes of material nature. So there is no date of birth or no date of expiry for the soul. The soul is does not mix with the material nature and maintains its identity.
So what does the person with Brahman vision see? He sees these three qualities of the soul. That it is beyond the modes, transcendental, spiritual, it is eternal, and does not mix with matter. So this is like a person, a good example is a coconut. So when coconut is still raw, then we will see that the pulp, the coconut is the pulp is attached with the shell. So when we want to make coconut chutney, we have to break it, and then we have to use considerable amount of effort and force to remove the coconut pulp from the shell. But in due course of time, when the coconut dries up in hot sun, it dries up, and then we can see that it actually, the pulp dries up and it detaches itself from the shell. So this is the situation of a person with Brahman vision. He does not really identify with the body, although he is residing in the body, in the material world, but he is detached from the material body. So he may act to set an example for others, he may do it for maintenance of his body, but he does not become entangled. So which means he does not do any activity driven for with the desire for sense enjoyment, and that is why he is unentangled. So one of the qualities we saw eternal. So there is no obituary for soul. In the newspapers, they print obituaries. That obituary is only for the body. There's a birth and death dates are written, but actually the person is still there.
So a quick summation of what we have learned so far. So in verse number 27, we saw that such a person, Agyan Chakshu, he distinguishes between spirit and matter. He knows that everything is a combination of spirit and matter, and he understands the difference between the two. In verse 28, we saw that one sees indestructible supersoul. So he understands that the soul and the supersoul, both of them are residing in all the bodies, and though the body is destructible, the soul and supersoul is indestructible.
Then in the 29th verse, we saw that how the supreme soul or the super soul of Paramatma is equally present everywhere. So it is not that it is present only in humans and there is no Paramatma in the lower species. No, that's not the case.
And then in verse 30, we saw that one sees that all activities are performed by the body and the self does nothing except desiring. So the self does not do anything and the material body is working under the modes of material nature.
And then in the next verse, 31st verse, we see that although living entity is in this material world, in this material body, but does not get mixed with the body, it remains at all times, it remains distinct from the body. And that is the field of activities. From the field of activities.
And the verse 32, we saw that when one sees that the soul never mixes with the body, but is transcendental and eternal. So let's proceed further. Yatha sarvagatam saukshmyat akasham nopalipyate sarvatravastito dehe tathatmanopalipyate yatha prakashayati ekah kritsnam lokam imam ravihi kshetram kshetri tatha kritsnam prakashayati bharata. So here in verse number 33 and in 34, Krishna is giving two examples. Now these two examples are to make us understand that how the body and the soul, they are different. So the first example what he gives is the sky, due to its subtle nature, does not mix with things, although it is all pervading. Similarly, the soul situated in Brahma vision does not mix with the body, though situated in that body. So now we see sky and then there are clouds, but the clouds and sky do not become one, though they exist simultaneously. The second he is telling is, O son of Bharat, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity one within the body illuminate the entire body by consciousness. So these are the two examples which Krishna is giving here.
So here Lord is explaining that the soul is so subtle that it is impossible to see it with our eyes. We cannot see with our eyes. So Krishna also explained the soul resides in the region of the heart. So ideally, when the cardiologist, cardiac surgeon is performing surgery and he opens the heart, he should be in a position to see, oh, soul is there. But soul is so subtle, it's not visible to material eyes. How it resides in the material body cannot be understood. And even at the time of death, when the soul is leaving the body, one cannot see. So that is how it is very, very subtle.
So here we see that the clouds are there and the sky is there and they don't mix, they don't get entangled. So similarly, the soul and the material world or the body does not mix. And the second is the soul illuminates the body by consciousness. So I'm sure all of you are sitting in a room with a, let's say, a tube light. So if the tube light is there, now tube light is fixed somewhere on the roof or on the wall. And when we turn it on, the light spreads and it illuminates or brightens up the entire room. So the light physically does not have to travel on your seat or on your computer table for that place to brighten up. The light is situated in one place, but its presence is felt in like throughout the room just by the light which spreads there. So similarly, the symptom of soul is consciousness, and the soul illuminates the entire body by that consciousness. क्षेत्र क्षेत्रज्ञयोरेवम् अंतरं ज्ञान चक्षुषा भूत प्रकृति मोक्षं च ये विदुर्यान्ति ते परम्.
Those who see with eyes of knowledge, Gyan Chakshu, second line. Those who see with eyes of knowledge the difference between the body and the knower of the body, and can also understand the process of liberation from bondage in material nature, attain to the supreme goal. So Krishna is moving ahead and he's saying is that those who can see from Gyan Chakshu, those who can see from the eyes of knowledge, they understand the difference between body and soul, and they also understand the process of liberation. So for a normal person who does not understand that we are not this body, he has no knowledge of soul, where is the question of liberation? So therefore these the knowledge in this chapter is actually the foundation or the building blocks of Krishna consciousness. So based on this, only he can inquire about higher things, about liberation. Okay, I am caught up in this body is temporary, how do I get out of it? That question arises only when he begins to see from the eyes of knowledge. So Krishna is saying, when one attains this Shastra Chakshu, then actually he can proceed on the path of supreme goal or spiritual world. So of course, this process of liberation or this knowledge of soul, super soul, body, it comes when we have some little faith. We take some good association of devotees. We accept a spiritual master. We understand under their guidance. We try to understand the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. Then we get this knowledge, and then we actually begin the process of liberation. What has been told to us or informed, or we have been given these blessings by Lord Chaitanya, that not just liberation, but we can go to the highest planet of the spiritual world and personally associate with the ocean of happiness, Lord Krishna, by the process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the knowledge is there, the process of liberation is there, and that is how we attain the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Paramam Padam. Humbly developing knowledge under the guidance of bona fide spiritual master, one can actually be freed from the entanglements of this material.
With this, we complete chapter 13. Here we are in chapter 14, the three modes of material nature. So the total chapter has 27 verses divided into 4 sections. And this is a very important chapter. We have seen that in chapter number 13, verse 24, Krishna talks about the modes of material nature. And then he talks the whole chapter explaining us, because this is the practical application which we need to understand. So we need to know what are these modes, how these modes act, how these modes are binding, and how these modes can give us liberation.
So how the ropes can, understanding the ropes, we understand how we can free ourselves from those ropes. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Param Bhuya Pravakshyami Jnananam Jnanam Uttamam Yajgyatva Munaya Sarve Param Siddhim Hito Gataha Idam Jnanam Upashritya Mama Sadharyam Agataha Sarge Nopajayante Pralayena Vithanticha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Again I shall declare to you this supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all the sages have attained the supreme perfection. So Lord is telling here that this knowledge that I'm going to give you, the explanation and the description of the three modes of material nature, understanding this knowledge, there are so many people in the past, the sages who have understood this knowledge, they have attained liberation. They have become free from this bondage of the modes of material nature. By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. So if we understand this knowledge of the three modes, we become fixed on our spiritual path, and we can become free from the modes and go attain a spiritual form like that of the Lord, go back to the spiritual world, serve him there. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation or disturbed at the time of dissolution. So we see that there are many types of destruction. There is a destruction of this body. Then there is a destruction at the end of Brahma's day. And then we see another destruction at the end of Brahma's life. Krishna is saying any of these destructions, or for that matter, any creation, will not disturb you if you're firmly fixed in this knowledge. So Krishna is glorifying this pure knowledge of modes of material nature. He's saying it's best of all, gives liberation, attains transcendental nature of the Lord and that of eternality.
So Krishna says it is the best of all knowledge, and he glorifies this chapter before he is even beginning to talk about the modes. He is actually glorifying these modes. So why is it so very powerful or important piece of information which he is about to talk? Because this particular knowledge actually helps us in our day-to-day life, in our every single day, making the choices based on the modes. And then when we make proper choices, we reach our proper destination. So our goal is self-realization. Then we have to realize, what am I doing wrong? Where am I going wrong? So first is that this knowledge talks about that day-to-day things. Second is that Krishna is telling that many saintly people have actually attained perfection just because of being aware of this knowledge, which means Krishna is giving strong references from the past that this path has worked. Yeah, it works. It is a foolproof system. So if you follow, it will work. The third point is that Krishna is telling that just by acquiring that knowledge, one can attain transcendental nature like Krishna, which means one qualitatively becomes one like Krishna. He becomes free from birth and death, the cycle of birth and death. So the person becomes eternal actually. So that is what Krishna is telling, that one acquires his nature, one acquires eternality. The knowledge that is not contaminated by the three modes of nature is called transcendental knowledge. Krishna has been imparting us that most important knowledge. So we do not find this knowledge anywhere else. So we may be PhDs, we may have done a lot of professional courses, but nowhere we get this knowledge which Krishna is giving us. And this is the knowledge which can actually make our life perfect. It is left up to us to act upon the same.
Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhavah sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata sarva yoneshu kaunteya murtayah sambhavanti yaha tasam brahma mahad yonir aham bija pradah pita. The total material substance called Brahman is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharat. So here Krishna is referring to the material nature, and he is saying that she is the mother and I am the father. I impregnate. So like we were giving the example that how a farmer plants a seed in the soil becomes the mother and the seed fructifies because of that, or a father impregnates the mother by placing the seed of a child. Mother gives the body and the soul is there. So similarly, Krishna is saying that that he is the one who places all these souls in the mother earth, mother Prakriti. So sometimes what may happen is, actually, there's a very common misconception when you ask people, where does living entities come from? Where does this rose come from? Where does this mango come from? Oh, mango comes from mango tree. Mango tree comes from the seed, and the seed comes from, so what came first, the egg or the chicken? So that kind of question, and then people become little frustrated. They say, no, everything comes from nature. So, sometimes earlier in the villages, they will have a huge heap of rice. They will cultivate rice and have a huge heap of rice. And sometimes from the rice comes scorpion. So, a person who is a little foolish may think, oh, the rice gives birth to scorpions. But that is actually not the case. Sometimes the mother scorpion will come somewhere, lay the eggs because of the heat of heaped rice. The eggs will, mature, and a baby scorpion will come out from it. So, thinking that rice gives birth to scorpion is same as thinking that living entities come from Mother Nature. So Krishna is clarifying that doubt so that we don't make that mistake. Verse 4, and Krishna is again emphasizing this. It should be understood that all species of life, not just human beings, not just devatas, all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed giving Father. So here, if you see in this verse, the last line, Aham Bija Pradha Pita. So next time when you are asked to write the name of your father, you know what to write. The father that we have right now is biological father, but our real father is Supreme Lord Krishna. That should give you a lot of happiness. So Jiva's contact with material nature, Krishna is the father, Prakriti is the mother of all Jivas. So she has given us this body. So in father, mother name, we know what to write. Krishna is our original father, and therefore Krishna consciousness is all about understanding, realizing, and reawakening our relationship with our eternal father.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,
Hare Hare. So a couple of announcements before we close the session. First thing, your reading assignment from verse number 4 to 18 from chapter 14. Second thing, that the quiz has been uploaded for chapter 13. So we request you that you please kindly go through the website, log in with your credentials, and complete the quiz for chapter 13 before you start forgetting what we read in chapter 13. The third thing, a very important announcement regarding a course which we are about to launch. The title of the course is Devotion in Action. So we are talking about so many principles, the fundamental principles in Bhagavad Gita. Now, if I have to live my life in accordance with these principles of Bhagavad Gita, but then I get very angry, or maybe I am not able to control my mind so much, or maybe I have problem with relationships with the people whom I stay, if I have problem with them. So how do I solve these problems, and how do I become a nice devotee of Krishna? So devotion in action gives you answer to all such questions about how do I handle myself in a way that I become a better devotee, so that I perfect my life by the end of this lifetime. So we will be sharing the details about this course through email and through our WhatsApp group. So
thank you very much. And
yes.
yeah, and unfortunately, we are not able to have a question answer session today because we have something which is just after this session. So please post your questions on the Q&A link, and if you have any other personal query, you can always drop in a message to amar@studygita.com or sukirti@studygita.com. So we'll be very glad to help you out. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.